Hi class, let's take a look at input validation loops in Python. We're going to use the while loop for this. It wouldn't make sense to use a for because we don't have a fixed number of iterations. Instead, we're going to use a condition controlled loop like the while loop, since that will keep on going until a certain condition is met. And in this case, that condition is that the user has entered the number that we have instructed them to enter. Here's an example. Let's suppose that we need the user here to enter a 10. Nice and simple, just enter a 10. Well, if we use an if statement, if they enter something here and now we've got their entry. If we use an if statement like this, we could give them a warning message saying, okay, well, you didn't enter 10, but the problem with this if statement is that it's not going to repeat. So that's why we never use if statements for validation. It's always got to be a loop, because what if they make another mistake the second time they're entering? And if we use an if statement here, we would let them go ahead and enter it again. But since control of this if statement now shifts to the next statement past the if control structure, then the user is never validated, and we don't look at entry again to make sure it's a 10. So this is not going to work. If statements will not work. Instead, what we'll use is a while loop, and we'll tell the user to enter a 10. And let's say that they entered a 4 by mistake. Well, we're just going to enter a loop. We're going to give them this message here saying, nope, you made an error, please enter again. And we go back to the top of the loop. And they enter something else. Maybe they enter a 100 this time. Well, that's not a 10, so we stay in the loop. We give them this message, nope, enter it again. And we go back and around until finally they enter the right number. Now, you'll need to get used to using while loops in our coding, because from this point on in the semester, I will expect you to use an input validation loop anytime we ask the user to enter something, and that entry has got to be with constraints. Maybe we're telling them enter in a certain range, or maybe we're telling them to enter a certain value. So the way that while loop would be constructed, it's very simple. You'll be able to memorize this. And again, you'll be using this in every program anytime we need to enter something. So this assumes that at this point in the code that we've got some variable called entry, right? We can prompt the user and we can get that, and whatever we need to do. Well, we can construct our while loop and just say, well, while entry is not equal to 10, then we're going to stay inside this while loop. So what do we have to do inside the while loop? What would our tasks be? Well, first is to instruct the user that there has been an error. And then the second is to get entry again. We have to afford them the opportunity to fix their error. How do we do that? Well, we give them another opportunity to input their entry. And we can do all of that in just one line. And there we go. There's our prompt. The prompt delivers the message, hey, there was an error. I need a 10 only. And then that's converted to an integer, and then that's assigned to entry. And now we go back up to the top of this loop, and we figure out whether or not entry is 10 or not. Let's take a look at some code that'll support this and hopefully make it a little clearer. Here's our Jupyter notebook with that input validation loop. So here we are getting a number from the user, and we're instructing them enter only a 10. And yes, I know this is kind of a silly example, but the framework is what we're learning here, not these silly little details. The framework here is that we can use this for a variety of circumstances, just modify that code. So here we've gotten input from the user, we've instructed them, enter only a 10. I mean, that's pretty clear, right? Now then, here's our 2-line input validation loop. It's just 2 lines. While entry is not 10, then we're going to give them that combined error message and the opportunity to correct their mistake by re-entering a value. Now, what I like to do is anytime there's an error message, I like to indent that in the output grid there. I like to indent it a tab stop, which is 10 spaces, and 8 spaces on this Jupyter Notebook. And it just kind of makes your output flow a little bit better rather than just being all jumbled together. We get some, some differentiation of, okay, well, I'm in an error loop now because all of these messages are being tabbed together. So let's run this now, and you'll see the prompt enter a 10, and I'm so smart, I'm gonna enter a 4. And that's wrong. I get the error message saying, nope, 10 only, please. I'm gonna enter a 5 now and a 6. I'm really struggling with this. I just cannot enter a 10. There we go, I'm gonna enter a 10. Whoops, it's a 100. I get the error message. Finally, I'm going to, well, you can see here that we are stuck in this loop until we enter a 10. I'm finally gonna enter a 10, and then we exit the loop, and then I get that valid entry print statement executed, just kind of validating, yep, it was a 10 that worked, and entry is currently a 10. So this example applies for if you have a specific number that has to be entered. Here's another example, though, that will support if the user has to enter a value within a certain range. So here, the challenge to the user is going to be just enter something between 10 and 50. That's it, 10 and 50. And let's be very good programmers and tell our users exactly what to enter. Is it 10 to 50 exclusive or inclusive? Is 10 part of the solution space? Is it allowable, or is 10 not allowable? Let's just be very explicit to the user. Here I'm saying with this prompt, enter an integer between 10 and 50 inclusive. So that means that 10 and 50 are going to be included in the set of good values. Well, here's our 2-line input validation loop. Here's the same line that we used before where they have to correct the entry. And then let's just look at the while loop. We're just putting 2 relational expressions together, and we connect them with a Boolean variable or. And conversationally, this makes sense. It says, okay, while the entry is less than 10, or while the entry is greater than 50, then we'll stay in this validation loop until finally it works. So I'm going to run this now and just, of course, intentionally enter a lot of bad values. Well, that's a good bad value. And then finally, I'm going to enter a 45. And that was within the range, and then it stops there. All right, and just a reminder, I post all of this code to Canvas along with these videos. They're in the format of a Jupyter Notebook, so make sure that you download and run all of those and play with them. Change the parameters, try doing something a little bit more complex. That's where the real learning is going to happen in this course. All right, thanks everybody.